They say betrayal rarely comes from enemies. I learned that in the hardest way possible. At 2:08 a.m. on a quiet Thursday morning, I opened an email that brought 6 years of my life to an abrupt end with a single hollow sentence. Thank you for all your hard work, but we've decided to bring in someone with more experience. Please clear your desk on Monday. No call, no meeting, not even my name in the subject line. Just that. I sat frozen in my chair, the dim glow of my laptop casting long shadows across the room. I was still at the office, of course, wrapping up a system audit, preparing for a big investor meeting. My boss, Adrian Mills, had gone home hours earlier, as usual, after casually asking me to lock up. At first, I wasn't angry, just disoriented. Then that familiar cold sensation washed over me. The same numbness I'd felt when my father left us without a word, just a post-it on the fridge saying, "Don't wait up." I reread the email. Then I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was inevitable. 6 years ago, Adrian and I had launched Everest Technologies with nothing but a scrappy Google Doc and a pitch deck that had been mocked in a dozen rooms. We coded in Adrian's garage, living off instant noodles and stale coffee. We told each other we were going to change the world. For a moment we did. We built a product that transformed the logistics industry, a predictive analytics platform that saved millions in delays. When we closed the $10 million Series A last fall, Adrian stood on stage in a sharp tailored suit I'd never seen before and declared, "This company wouldn't be here without teamwork." Teamwork, right, not me, the one who designed the system. Not the 2,000 hours I spent debugging our machine learning engine while he sipped wine at networking events in Napa. Now I was disposable, swapped out for someone with more experience. The email didn't mention a name, but I knew who it was. Ryan, a smooth-talking VP from a competitor who once tried to recruit me at a conference. I'd turned him down. Apparently, Adrian hadn't. I closed my laptop gently, no slamming, no tears. I wasn't the kind of woman who made a scene. I was the kind who made a plan. And I had one. While Adrian basked in accolades, I quietly documented every decision, every line of code, every architectural diagram. Not to be vindictive, just meticulous. I had built the system on my own machine in my apartment before Everest even existed, and I had the receipts to prove it. I walked through the dark office, past desks I'd assembled, whiteboards filled with my handwriting, the untouched bottle of Prosecco Adrian promised we'd open when the contracts were signed. He never did. At the door I paused, not with regret, but with resolve. They thought I'd just disappear. They were wrong. On Monday morning, I showed up as instructed. I packed my things, a small notebook, a photo of my sister and me from college, and the potted succulent Adrian gave me for my birthday 2 years ago. I left the plant on his desk. No one spoke. A few avoided my gaze. One intern whispered, "You don't deserve this." I nodded silently, then left without looking back. That afternoon, I sent Adrian a single sentence, "Good luck." He didn't reply. He thought it was over. It wasn't. 3 weeks prior, I'd been approached by a partner at a venture firm. They loved the tech, but they weren't sold on Adrian. Now Adrian was about to learn what it meant to lose the person who built the core of his business. The first call would come exactly 90 days later, and when it did, his voice would crack just enough for me to recognize the panic. 3 days after the email, I slept in for the first time in months. No Slack pings, no frantic 3 a.m. alerts about server load, no last-minute requests labeled urgent, but sent at midnight. Just silence. Heavy, disorienting silence. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. I wandered my apartment like a stranger, opening cupboards, closing them, standing still, sitting down. For 6 years, I had run on pure adrenaline. And now, in the stillness, everything felt off. But by the end of the week, I rediscovered something I hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. I opened my personal Git repositories. There it was, the blueprint for Everest's core product. The first version of the data engine, written in Python, crafted on my secondhand MacBook in a cramped studio apartment. The code, the timestamps, the commits, all of it predating Everest's official incorporation, every line stamped with my name. This wasn't revenge, it was proof. Adrian had always been the charming one. Investors adored him. He could sell a pen with a TED Talk smile. But charm doesn't architect a scalable backend. Charm doesn't debug a recursive loop at 4 a.m., while your hands are shaking from too much caffeine and too little sleep. That was me, every single time. I remembered when he once called me his secret weapon. Back then, I thought it was a compliment. Now I understood what it really meant. A tool to be used and discarded. By week 2, the LinkedIn posts started rolling in. Adrian, all grins and self-congratulations, announcing Everest's strategic pivot and the hiring of Ryan Maxwell as their new CTO. No mention of me, no farewell, not even a polite tag. Ryan's caption read, "Excited to bring my enterprise experience to take Everest to the next level." I actually laughed. Enterprise experience? The guy had spent the last 5 years bouncing between consulting gigs, leaving half-baked implementations and bloated invoices in his wake. Ryan couldn't architect his way out of a paper bag. I closed LinkedIn and checked my inbox. No messages from Adrian, of course. But there was a brief note from Danielle, one of our backend engineers who had often stayed late to help me with deployments. "Just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. It's not the same without you. Ryan doesn't even understand half the stack. They're patching things daily. Just wanted you to know we miss you." I replied with a single line. "Thanks for telling me. Keep your head down and save the logs." By week 3, the cracks started to show. A contact from Signaps Capital, a rival investor group, reached out. "We heard about your departure. Would you be open to discussing new opportunities?" They also added, "By the way, someone on our tech team noticed Everest's system performance has dropped dramatically since last month. Any idea why?" I didn't answer, not yet. Instead, I scheduled a meeting. The following day, I sat across from 3 partners in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Palo Alto. I wore the same navy blazer I'd worn to our Series A pitch. Except this time, I wasn't representing someone else's dream. I was exploring my own. They asked me about Everest. I gave them the public version. Differences in vision, time to move on, no hard feelings. But when they pressed, I showed them the early code base. Their expressions changed. "You built this before Everest was even a company?" one of them asked. I nodded, nights and weekends, in my apartment. They exchanged glances. "And your employment contract? Any clauses about IP transfer?" "Standard boilerplate," I replied. "But the core engine predates all of that, and I have the documentation to prove it." One of the partners leaned back in his chair, smiling slightly. "Well, Ms. Foster, it seems you're holding something very valuable." I left the meeting without a new company, but I had something more important: leverage. For the first time in years, I felt the ground beneath my feet was finally mine. That evening, I opened a folder on my laptop titled Failsafe. Inside were files I'd quietly compiled over the years. Nothing malicious, just a meticulous collection. Architecture diagrams, integration logs, backend protocols, security documentation. All time-stamped, all signed. Proof. They showed 2 undeniable facts. First, I had built the very heart of Everest's system. Second, that without me, they were standing on crumbling ground. I knew the countdown had started. Exactly 90 days after Adrian's email, his name popped up on my phone screen. I didn't answer. I watched it ring until it stopped, then set the phone down and smiled. The first call wasn't the last. 2 more followed in quick succession, each one from Adrian. Each one I let go unanswered. This wasn't pettiness, it was strategy. I wanted him to stew in the uncertainty, to sit in the consequences of his own choices. He'd gambled I'd vanish quietly, but I wasn't playing by his rules anymore. Then the email came, subject line, urgent, need your input. I opened it out of curiosity, not urgency. It read, "Eva, I realize things ended abruptly, and I regret how I handled that. Ryan is having trouble stabilizing the architecture for our upcoming release. The team mentioned you may have documentation that could help. Would you be open to a quick call? We're happy to compensate you for your time." Compensate me for my own work? Adrian still didn't get it. I didn't reply, but I started watching. Everest's Twitter account became a flood of user complaints. Login failures, syncing delays, dashboards crashing during peak hours. The cracks weren't hairline fractures anymore. They were fissures. That's when Danielle messaged me again, this time through Signal. Hey, just between us, Ryan tried to modify your codebase and broke the entire back end. He didn't understand your data validation layers, so he bypassed them. Now reports aren't syncing properly and client data is a mess. Adrian is freaking out. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, "Thanks for keeping me in the loop. Be careful. Don't get caught in the crossfire." I knew exactly what was coming next. Sure enough, 2 days later, Everest's head of legal reached out. A vague formal request asking for clarification on ownership of certain product components. Valerie, my attorney, flagged it before I even saw it. We met that afternoon in her office. "They're prepping for a legal move," she said, flipping through my documentation. The old commits, Slack threads, diagrams, receipts. They're hoping to corner you quietly, settle this before it blows up. "And if I don't respond?" I asked. "They'll escalate." But that's not a bad thing, Ava. You're ready for this. You've got it all documented. And if they use your system without an agreement in place, that's a clear case of IP infringement. I leaned back and exhaled slowly. It was happening. The thing I'd anticipated for months. I remembered every time Adrian dismissed my concerns. Every time he waved off my warnings with a smug, "Let's not overcomplicate things, Eva." Every investor pitch where he took credit for code he couldn't even read. He had bet on charm, but now the bill was coming due. The next morning, another email landed, this one from Ryan. "Hi, Eva. I hope you're well. I wanted to ask if you could shed some light on how the authentication modules integrate with the back end. We've run into a few issues and could really use your expertise. Happy to compensate you for your time." I almost laughed. Ryan, the expert, was fishing for answers now, resorting to desperate politeness. The same guy who once told a panel that back-end infrastructure isn't that hard if you understand business logic, was now stuck in the very logic he couldn't grasp. But what really hit me was that line, "Happy to compensate you for your time." 6 years of unacknowledged work, no proper exit, no recognition. And now they wanted to pay me for a system I had built from scratch. I didn't reply to Ryan. Instead, I asked Valerie to draft a formal notice. It outlined everything. My original authorship of the core architecture and predictive engine. Evidence the codebase predated my employment. Lack of any signed transfer of intellectual property beyond what the standard employment contract covered. And finally, a cease and desist on the use of my system without a formal licensing agreement. The letter ended with a simple line. "We are open to a good faith discussion should your client wish to acknowledge the rightful ownership of proprietary systems developed by Ms. Foster." We sent it, and then we waited. That weekend, Everest's entire platform suffered an 8-hour blackout. Client dashboards failed, data syncing froze, and public complaints flooded social media. The hashtag #DrEverestFail trended for the first time, not the kind of viral they wanted. Multiple clients released public statements hinting at exploring alternative solutions. The final blow? An article on TechSignal titled "The Everest Collapse: When Startups Undervalue Their Core Talent." It quoted anonymous sources, mentioned insider chats, and painted a very different picture from Adrian's usual spin. My name? It appeared only once, noted simply as the former lead engineer who declined to comment. But the message was clear. The industry was paying attention. Adrian's phone was probably ringing nonstop that week. But mine? Mine was the one they truly needed to answer. And I wasn't done yet. By the start of week 4, the silence had shifted. It wasn't the calm of a system running smoothly. It was the ominous hum of a machine straining under pressure, moments from a breakdown. My cease and desist letter had landed like a warning shot. I hadn't expected an overnight reaction, but I knew it would trigger the inevitable. It arrived as a calendar invite. Subject: board discussion. Strategic review. Sender: Claire Wu, board member, Everest Technologies location. Private conference room at an investor firm. Time Friday 9:30 a.m. Note: confidential. Your attorney is welcome to attend. This wasn't a polite request. They weren't inviting me for optics anymore. They were calling me because they knew they had lost control, and they were hoping I'd help fix it. That evening, I met with Valerie in her corner office overlooking the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across her desk. "Do we accept?" I asked. She didn't even blink. "Absolutely, but only on our terms. They're not inviting you as a formality, Ava. They're inviting you because they've realized you hold the keys." That night, I couldn't sleep much. Not out of nerves, but anticipation. For years, I'd been the person behind the scenes, the one who kept the system alive, who built the engine while someone else took the wheel. Adrian had been the face, the voice, the one who shook hands and sealed deals. But now? Now the investors were peeling back the glossy facade, and they were starting to see the cracks underneath. They were coming to find the person who actually kept the machine running. The boardroom was exactly what I expected. Sleek, sterile, too modern. 4 board members sat on one side, an assistant at the far end typing notes. Claire Wu nodded politely when I entered. She had been one of Everest's earliest backers. Sharp, no nonsense, and from what I'd heard, increasingly skeptical of Adrian's leadership. Adrian was already seated, his posture rigid, face pale. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by something thinner, more brittle. He didn't stand to greet me, just gave a curt nod. "Eva," he muttered. Valerie, as always, was poised, calm. She placed a single folder on the table, her hands steady. The folder contained everything: the documentation, the timestamps, the commits, the Slack threads, a roadmap of 6 years' worth of overlooked work. Claire spoke first. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Foster. I know the situation has been challenging, but we felt it necessary to meet before taking further steps." I nodded. "Understood." Another board member, a tall man with silver-rimmed glasses, cut in sharply. "Let's be clear. The architecture Eva developed is critical to Everest's platform. Our understanding is the portions of it were built before her employment and may not have been formally transferred." Adrian's voice broke through, tight with tension. "I don't agree with that characterization. We built this company together. Anything developed during her time here belongs to Everest." Valerie slid the folder forward. "We anticipated that argument. Inside, you'll find detailed logs, commit histories, and evidence from both local repositories and cloud backups. Much of it predates any signed agreements. You'll also see internal messages where Mr. Mills acknowledges Ms. Foster's independent work." Claire flipped through the documents. Her eyes narrowed as she read a highlighted exchange. Then she looked up at Adrian, her tone cutting. "Did you know this wasn't formally transferred?" Adrian's jaw tensed. "I assumed." Claire didn't miss a beat. "That's the problem." Silence hung in the room. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. Valerie leaned forward slightly, her voice measured. "We're not here to destroy Everest. Ms. Foster believes in the product she helped build, but she won't allow her work to be misused or erased. We're open to negotiating a fair licensing agreement, and, more importantly, correcting the narrative." A board member looked at me, his gaze sharp. "And what exactly are you asking for, Ms. Foster?" My voice was steady, calm. "Recognition, licensing fees, a public correction of the record. I want it clear that the core system was my creation, not a vague team effort or someone else's story." Claire nodded slowly. "And if we agree, then you get my cooperation, my documentation, my support, and the chance to stabilize your platform before more clients walk." "And if we don't?" I held her gaze unflinching. "Then I file for IP infringement and take this public. And I think you understand what that means for your valuation." Claire exhaled a slow, measured breath. "Understood." Adrian shot up from his chair, his voice sharp with panic. "This is blackmail!" "No," I said softly, meeting his eyes. "This is accountability, something you never thought you'd have to face." He looked around the room, waiting for someone to defend him. No one did. As Valerie and I walked out, she leaned in and whispered, "You just changed the entire game." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just about getting credit for what I'd built. It was about reclaiming my story before someone else erased it completely. And they were just starting to understand how much they'd underestimated me. The boardroom meeting changed the dynamics, not just for them, but for me too. For the first time, I wasn't just defending what I'd built. I was owning it. The next morning, my phone rang. It wasn't an assistant or a calendar invite. It was Claire Wu herself. Her voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of urgency. "Eva," she began, "we reviewed everything last night. The documentation is clear. Frankly, we're shocked it took this long for it to come to light." "I'm not," I replied simply. Claire sighed, a low exhale that hinted at frustration. "Fair enough. The board met again this morning. Adrian doesn't know yet, but we've scheduled a vote for early next week to discuss a leadership restructure." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Are you saying they're removing him?" "I'm saying," Claire answered carefully, "that some leaders build and some just benefit. And we've realized it's time to stop confusing the two." I didn't respond. There was no need. Before she hung up, she added, "We'll be in touch soon. And Eva, thank you for forcing us to see the truth." That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a walk by the marina. It was a simple thing, but it felt like reclaiming a small part of myself. The water shimmered in the afternoon light, the sailboats drifting quietly by. It reminded me of those early Everest days, when Adrian and I would take breaks from coding to watch the boats and dream about what we could build. Back then, we didn't have a company, just a notebook, a few lines of code, and a lot of promises. Somewhere along the way, I kept building, while Adrian started selling an illusion. The sky was clear, but the storm was brewing, not in the clouds, but in the inboxes of everyone still inside Everest. By Monday, Valerie had finalized the licensing agreement. It was fair, even generous. I wasn't here for revenge. I wanted proper recognition and the guarantee that no one could ever use my work without permission again. It was clean, legal, binding. We sent the proposal to the board at 9 a.m. At 11:30 a.m., Adrian called me, the first time in weeks. This time, I picked up. "Eva," he started, his tone laced with that familiar forced charm. "I think we've let things get a bit too heated. There's no need for all this hostility." "It's not hostility," I replied evenly. "It's structure, something you never really valued." "I didn't mean for things to end this way," he said, shifting gears. "But you have to understand, investors expect leadership to make tough decisions. Bringing in Ryan seemed like the right call at the time." I let the silence stretch just long enough for it to sting. Then I said quietly, "You fired me by email." He exhaled sharply. "That was a mistake." "No," I corrected. "It was a choice, and now you're watching the consequences of that choice unfold." There was a pause, a heavy one. "They're voting, aren't they?" he asked finally. I didn't confirm. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. "You're replacing me." I leaned back in my chair, my voice steady. "You replaced me first." Another long, brittle silence. Then he muttered, "I never thought you'd do this." "I know," I replied, my voice soft. "That was your biggest mistake." By Wednesday morning, the vote was finalized. Adrian was out, officially removed from the CEO role by unanimous decision. Claire Wu called me herself. No assistant, no formalities, just her calm voice over the line. "The board would like to offer you the CTO position, along with a revised equity package, full oversight on technical hires, and, most importantly, public recognition of your contributions," she said. "The licensing agreement has also been approved. You'll receive royalties on all revenue tied to the predictive engine and data platform you created." It wasn't just a job offer, it was vindication. "I'll need time to consider it," I replied, and for the first time, I truly meant it. Because now I had options. Not just with Everest, but beyond. 3 firms had reached out in the past month. 2 were early-stage startups looking for a technical co-founder. The third was a multinational offering a 7-figure package to lead a division of their innovation lab. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at any of those offers, desperate for recognition. But now I was in control. That afternoon, TechSignal released a follow-up article, "The Woman Behind the Code." How Eva Foster rescued a sinking startup she helped build. They'd interviewed anonymous insiders, quoted board members, even Danielle. There was no mention of Adrian, except in past tense. Ryan wasn't mentioned at all. The narrative was clear. The real architect had returned, not as a savior, but as the rightful leader. I closed my laptop and gazed out the window. Everest was stabilizing. The truth was out. The power dynamics had flipped. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't waiting for someone else to tell my story. I was writing it myself. 3 months after the board's decision, I stood in the Everest auditorium, facing a sea of familiar and new faces: engineers, analysts, operations interns. Some had been there from the start. Others were recent hires brought in during the chaos. They all had questions. They all were watching me. I took a breath, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to be intentional with my words. A lot has changed, I began. Some of it fast, some of it long overdue. But if there's one thing I want to emphasize today, it's this. The systems we build aren't just made of code or servers. They're built from trust, collaboration, and the unseen effort of every person who contributes. If we forget that, if we sacrifice integrity for growth or hide flaws to protect egos, we risk losing everything. Silence settled over the room, the kind that tells you people are truly listening. I continued. This company was born from an idea, but it survived because of invisible work, often unrecognized, often undervalued. I know that feeling. Many of you do too. So, starting today, we're rewriting how we acknowledge contribution. We'll lead with transparency, and we'll succeed together. A few tentative claps grew into something louder, more genuine. It wasn't just polite applause, it was relief. It was hope. After the meeting, Claire found me backstage. Her expression was warmer now, less guarded. "We've had several clients reach out," she said. "They're impressed by the platform's stability, but more than that, they're impressed by the leadership shift. You've restored their confidence." I nodded. Stability starts at the foundation, and the foundation was always solid. It was just buried under a lot of ego. Claire chuckled softly. "Well, the ego left the building when Adrian did." I didn't ask about him. I didn't need to. Word had spread that he tried to launch a new venture a few weeks ago. But when investors heard about the Everest fallout, the near lawsuit, the board vote, the tech signal article, they pulled their funding. The bridges burned themselves. Ryan, he disappeared quietly. No press release, no LinkedIn post, just gone. And me? I had decisions to make. The board confirmed my CTO role, but they left the path open. I could consult, lead, or walk away entirely, on my terms. The licensing agreement was in place, generating royalties. My equity was secured, properly documented this time, airtight. Danielle had been promoted to engineering manager. Her first initiative? A mentorship program for junior developers. When I heard that, I smiled. About a month later, I received an unexpected email. No subject line, no familiar sender. Just a few quiet words. "Ava, I owe you an apology. I should have seen your value before it was too late. The truth is, I was afraid of being overshadowed by you. And I was. You built the core. You held it together. I didn't realize that until everything started to collapse without you. I hope someday you'll believe that I truly regret what I did." Adrian! I stared at the message for a long time. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just stillness. He was right. And in a way, I was grateful. Not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it brought me. The betrayal had forced me to confront my worth, to reclaim my story. I didn't reply. Some apologies aren't meant for a response. They're meant to be read, accepted, and left to settle in the past. That weekend, I returned to the little cafe where I used to go during the early Everest days, when all I had was a secondhand laptop, a few lines of code, and a dream no one believed in but me. I sat in the corner booth with a notebook, not a sleek tablet, but the old-fashioned kind with paper, pen, and pages waiting to be filled. I started sketching ideas. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't building to prove something to someone else. I was building for me. As the sun dipped behind the San Francisco skyline, it hit me. Everything I'd fought for wasn't just about recognition or royalties. It was about ownership of my time, my talent, my narrative. The legacy we leave behind isn't the logo on a product or the name on a building. It's the values we build into our work, and no one, not even the CEO who tried to erase me, could take that away. 3 months after the board's decision, I stood in the Everest auditorium, facing a sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces, engineers, analysts, operations, interns. Some had been here since the beginning, others were new, hired during the chaos. All of them watched me now, waiting. I took a breath, steady and unhurried. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. And this time, I wasn't standing here to patch up someone else's mess. I was standing here to lead. A lot has changed, I began, my voice calm but resolute. Some of it happened fast, some of it should have happened a long time ago. But if there's one thing I want to emphasize today, it's this. What we build here isn't just code, servers, and dashboards. It's people, ideas, trust, shared vision. And if we ever sacrifice those things for speed, for ego, for growth at any cost, we lose everything that matters. The room was still listening. This company started with a bold idea, I continued, but it survived because of effort. Often invisible effort from people who didn't get the credit they deserved. I know that feeling. Many of you do too. I paused, scanning the room. So from today forward, we're changing that. We're rewriting how we acknowledge contributions, starting with transparency and ending with shared success. The applause started as a few scattered claps, then swelled into something fuller, real, and raw. It wasn't just polite agreement. It was relief. It was belonging. Afterward, Claire approached me backstage. Her expression had softened, less formal, more genuine. Several clients have reached out, she said. They're impressed by the platform's recovery, but even more by the shift in leadership. You've restored their confidence. I nodded. Stability starts with a strong foundation, and that foundation was always there. It was just buried under layers of ego and noise. Claire smiled, a quiet acknowledgement. Well, the ego left the building with Adrian. I didn't ask about him. I didn't need to. I already knew. He'd tried to start a new venture a few weeks earlier, but when investors learned about the Everest fallout, the near lawsuits, the board removal, the exposés, they pulled their money. Some bridges burned themselves. Ryan had quietly faded away. No press release, no grand exit. Just gone. And me? I had decisions to make. The board confirmed my position as CTO, but left the door open. I could consult, lead, or exit entirely, on my terms. The licensing agreement was active, generating royalties. My equity stake was finally secure, documented, unassailable. Danielle had stepped into a new role as engineering manager, her first act, launching a mentorship program for junior devs. When I heard that, I smiled. It was a small victory, but an important one. One quiet morning, I received an email, no subject line, no familiar sender. I opened it cautiously. Ava, I've been thinking about everything. I know now I was wrong. You were the core of Everest. I was too blind to see it, too proud to admit it. I'm sorry, truly. I hope one day you'll believe that. Adrian. I stared at the words for a long moment, not with anger, not with triumph, just quiet understanding. He was right, and in a strange way, I was grateful. Not for the betrayal, but for the lessons it forced me to learn. I didn't reply. Some apologies are meant to be read, not answered. That weekend, I returned to the cafe where it all began, where I used to sit with a half-dead laptop and an idea no one believed in. This time I brought a fresh notebook, paper, pen, margins filled with tiny sketches and notes. I wasn't starting something new because I had to. I was doing it because I wanted to. The sunset cast a warm glow over the city skyline as I scribbled ideas. And I realized this. What I'd fought for wasn't just credit or royalties. It was the right to build on my terms, to create without fear of being erased, to own the story. Because in the end, the legacy we leave behind isn't the name on the product or the plaque on the wall. It's the values we embed in our work. And no one, not Adrian, not a boardroom full of suits, could ever take that away.